Running riot on worlder tanks is something we can all aspire to do, and this video aims to look at one of the tanks that will allow you to run riot and run rings around your opponents on worlder tanks console. So let's have a look at the tank. It is of course the T50-2, the Tier 6 Soviet light tank, and this one is probably one of the fastest tanks in the game, as you'll see the maximum speed up in the top right hand corner being 83 kilometers an hour. Yes, 83 kilometers an hour in a light tank. Your main weakness in this tank is of course yourself. Flipping over, doing stuff like that, that is commonplace in the T50-2, and since it's so slim, it's so slim and the tracks are so narrowly spaced that often if you go around a corner, even at full speed and absolutely flat terrain, you'll still roll, and we've had many occasions of that actually happening. However, with this video, we are going to be looking at some fantastic gameplay that I have managed to do, where we really did run rings around the opponents that we took out, and yeah, whether or not we can pick up a win, let's have a look at the gameplay and I'll talk more about the tank there. So the first gameplay we have for you is the best one, hopefully. It is a slow burner to begin with, but we will cover what the tank is good at within that section of gameplay at the beginning, but it really does heat up at the end, and it's probably one of the best games I've had in this tank overall, so it's a really good one. I've played the tank to quite a lot actually, probably looking at 60 games or something like that, for a tank that, you know, I don't particularly have much need to play. You know, it's not going to offer very many crew support, you aren't going to be able to earn an absolute ton of silver, and actually talking about the silver, you'll find that this tank is one of the ones that drains your account quite easily. So if you are interested in purchasing the T50-2, because you have such little penetration within this tank, you do have to fire premium rounds, and when you're coming up against tier 8 tanks, which a tank can come up against, you really do need those premium rounds. I can't say it enough. You have 85 damage and you've got 100 penetration with your standard rounds. If you're trying to come up against some of the higher tier heavies within the game, trying to do 85 damage, potentially anyway, with 100 penetration is probably, it's like a David and Goliath moment. You really do have to get round behind them and be shooting them in the side, and that is exactly how the T50-2 can be played to its strengths. It's all about using the speed of the tank, it's all about outmaneuvering your opponents and outthinking your opponents, and just using the 83 kilometers an hour top speed that we have on the tank. We have as part of this used the speed boost equipment, so this isn't the base speed. I think the base speed is about 72 kilometers an hour, but we've raised it up using advanced traction system and the other speed boost equipment, so we've essentially got 15% extra speed, and then we've also used fuel, which has boosted that up even further, which is always really nice, and it means that yes, you can get up to 80 kilometers an hour, as you see here. And actually, if you're going down a slope, 90 kilometers an hour, yeah, 90 kilometers an hour, that's kind of wheeled light tank on PC kind of level, which is something that I know can be a little bit unbalanced, especially if you're in a slow heavy tank, something like a Malshan. But then again, when you've got 100 penetration on your standard rounds, even if you get around the side of some of those really slow super heavies, it can be a little bit painful to try and pen them. Now, in this scenario, we've been very passive to begin with, but that stops now. We are now going to be going full speed into the opponents. There is, of course, 2 tanks in front of us. We've got the SU-152, which obviously you don't want to be getting hit by because you only have 580 hit points in the tank, which means pretty much any real high alpha TD is going to take either all of your hit points or 90% of them, because most of the tanks you come up against have 390 alpha damage plus, especially since you get light tank matchmaking, which is typically slightly different from standard tanks. You don't often get tier 6 matchups, although saying that, you don't often get tier 6 matchups in whatever tank you play, so yeah, it doesn't really make that much of a difference. Anyway, from this point you'll see it's time to go after the WZ-131, which is another fantastic tank I actually really did enjoy playing, and is really underrated actually, that tank. So make sure if you're interested in a light tank who's just destroyed himself falling off the bridge, which is something we definitely don't want to do with this stupidly high kind of traction, mobility and maneuverability that this tank has, because turning slightly on your controller means that you go flying off to the left or flying off to the right. Anyway, regardless of that, pushing forward in this game, obviously it's not looking too good. It's 12 and 8, and we've got to move forward and push our damage to the opponents. Obviously we tried to save the artillery, but the artillery, being a dirty pig, decided he's going to save himself anyway. So the M12 shuts down that AMX-12T auto-loading French light tank, which is kind of like our opposite number on the enemy team. No real complaints there. It means we don't have to deal with him. We have, however, lost a significant chunk of hit points, and that happens very regularly in this tank. If you're taking a big old hit, that means that, to be honest, it makes you useless for the later half of the game, and you really do want to conserve your hit points in the T50-2 for the end of the game, where maybe you want to take one hit and take the entirety of a heavy tank's hit points at the end of the game. Now, talking about that speed, you see that we over-rotated there, causing us to kind of move in the wrong direction. We ended up sliding sideways, which, yep, that is a common occurrence, and you have to be very, very mindful when you're going over bumps like this, because often, like we just did with the flat terrain, you're going sideways. You want to make sure as well with this tank that you are utilising that handbrake turn, and you'll see me using that all of the time. We've set up our controls actually so that you can use handbrake turn on the left bumper, or L1 for PlayStation, so that's something I would recommend if you're interested in playing a lot of light tanks, as we decide that apparently driving into a lamppost is a good idea in a paper tank. Obviously not a good idea, and we'll have to move and remove our position and hopefully not take any hits, because as we said, we need to conserve those hit points for the end of the game. Now, 3 to 7, it's looking absolutely diabolical. The rest of our team are on pretty low hit points. We've got an 88 over here. We've also got another tank destroyer somewhere that we don't know. I think it's the Jagdpanzer 4. We see that the 88 is actually here. He's starting to turn, so we're going to take a hard right and then try and get round behind him. Having only picked up 862 damage with this tank, it's not particularly a great round so far. You know, that's a pretty mediocre / average round in the T50-2, but that all kind of stops now. It's time for us to put on our big boy pants and decide to try and carry the game, get that backpack out, and let's hope that we can carry the game to victory. Obviously it's a 6 versus 2. I've got a tank destroyer over here. He is on full health. However, that is going to change very, very quickly as the Hellcat 105 decides that he's going to take on this Jagdpanzer 4. We're going to put one into the Jagdpanzer, and again we're going to put another one in, taking him out. So it's a 1 versus 5, which is a particularly bad one, because if you realise, the Tiger 1 was on absolutely full health. I got a VK on full health, and the Panther was also on full health. So it's really not looking good. We've got 2 artillery as well, and so what I'm going to do is disengage the targets. We're going to move around the map and try and position us in a place that they won't be thinking about, and that's what you can do in a tank that can go 87 kilometers an hour on the flat with no fuel activated. So this is something you'll see constantly with this tank. 87 kilometers an hour, that's kind of where it peaks off, unless you're going downhill, which it will increase the speed even more. Whether we'll see that now as we're going down this hill, no, not quite. Maybe we saw 89, but moving forward, obviously 1273 damage, not an awful result. We're getting into kind of decent game territory with that kind of damage. At tier 6 anyway. Obviously if you're at tier 10, that's absolutely nothing. But what we will do now is just try and hunt down that Tiger. Obviously we saw him over here, and if we can spot any of the artillery, that's also a mega bonus, and if we can remove those, it just takes the RNG out of the game, which of course is one of the key things that I hate within the game, is obviously those artillery pieces that just can potentially take you out of the game very easily. What you see me doing here, I thought he was actually going behind the thing, but he was actually behind solid cover, which is really annoying. You will notice someone's in the cap. We've also got 2 enemies that we have no idea where they are. The artillery are scurrying off into that little corner, the rat's nest that I like to call it. We can deal with those if you take the position from behind them. You can actually see where they are often, so we may have been able to catch them out, but I guess we'll go for the cap circle, because that's the most important thing right now. Obviously it's time limited, so if we don't get there in time, we're not going to be able to deal any damage. And what we're seeing now is of course taking a hard banking maneuver, hoping that they don't actually spot us. We're going to put 1 into the VK. Obviously just as we go round, we're going to get a lovely lag spike, meaning that we're now in a pretty awful position. Granted that they're both turning still, we're going to now take that as an opportunity to keep moving. And you'll see me actually turning side on, because that makes it a lot harder to hit an opponent. Keeping your direction moving is something that you always want to do in your light tanks, because that just basically makes it a lot harder to be able to hit, predict and aim at where you're going to be in a couple of seconds. Now we disengaged a little bit, obviously ramming into the pipes, which, yeah, not a good idea, but what we do now is just focus the priority, just keep resetting the cap, and now we're going to focus one tank in particular. You'll see that the Panther over there has decided he's going to take the big gun, and that is definitely something that you probably shouldn't do in the Panther. I did try it out myself and it really doesn't work. It's just pretty diabolically awful. But what we do now is obviously just try and take out this VK. Once we got rid of him, hopefully we can then take out the Panther. We saw his round come in, so it's time to put us in a flanking manoeuvre around the Panther. Obviously pretty slow turning turret. Got to be careful though. Got to keep moving and avoiding any of those high alpha shells that he's got. The VK there, unfortunately we made a bit of a misplay here, but we did turn side on to try and avoid taking a HE round into the side of our tank, which is something you'll notice, because if the tracks hit them, then you can actually avoid taking those hits. And what we'll do now is obviously go after, as the Tiger misses, the VK then misses, or the Panther even misses. We're going to take our time, aim that one, and then move back from away from the artillery. We've got a Tiger 1 on 900 hit points left, and we've managed to pick up 3,500 damage. At this point now, it's just a case of, if we can get round the Tiger, that's him done, realistically, if we play it right and if we don't make any mistakes. So what we're going to do is we're going to take a little bit of a time up the top. Unfortunately we crested the ridge and just stopped for a second, don't know why, but then unfortunately the Tiger swings around, hits us over the ridge line, and that's us out of the game, unfortunately ending up in a loss. But it was definitely a courageous fight for us and a close defeat. If I'd managed to get around that Tiger, and if I just didn't halt at that top of the ridge, we probably would have got down and around and then taken him out. But we did manage to pick up 3,480 damage in a tier 6 in a tier 7 matchup on a town map, which can't complain whatsoever. 178 assistance, not the biggest result, but 6 enemies destroyed and a fantastic result. I really hope you did enjoy watching that one, and I certainly enjoyed looking at it again and seeing where I went wrong. Definitely wouldn't have crested and stopped on that ridgeline. Don't know what I was thinking there, but we'll move into the next one and I will see you there. Now the second gameplay is on Overlord. Now I'm not going to say this is a fantastic result, but what it showcases is what happens in the tank probably 90% of the time if you're not paying attention. But yeah, what you need to do is be sure that you're not being silly, you're not looking around at other places. You do actually have to properly concentrate when you're playing this, at least when you're cresting ridgelines and moving around on the map. Because if you don't, you'll end up on your turret looking rather worse for wear. And as you see here, we do exactly that at the beginning of the game. We've lost our commander, we aren't running a med kit, meaning that we have lost him for the rest of the game. We've taken half of our hit points already from absolutely our own fault there. There's no enemy intervention, and I think at this point it's just time to go off in, because if we don't just go off in, it's going to be a boring game, and we'll probably just make it a little bit more interesting. And as we talked about with the moving around, somehow doing a barrel roll, have no idea how I didn't get taken out, but yeah, we see a couple more of those coming in a minute, but I literally don't understand how we didn't take out. Often if you go down a ridge and you just catch your track, sometimes it will just take out your entire tank, but for some reason that literally did absolutely nothing. Now this is what you'll see. The traverse speed of the tank compared to some of the other tanks within the game is not particularly the best. You do definitely have really good mobility, and I'm not going to say you don't, but in some cases you do have to really think about where you're going to be moving before you do so, because otherwise you are going to be getting into a pretty tough scenario and you have to think about that. So something I would definitely think about before I purchase this tank. If you're any good with light tanks before, if you're interested in getting your hands on a light tank to try it out, then this is definitely one that is probably one of the easier ones to do in terms of just having fun, and you'll definitely enjoy it. You probably might not have the best results comparatively to some of the others, but you'll probably enjoy it the most. So yeah, although this gameplay is fairly short, it does kind of show quite a few different qualities of the T50-2, and you see that it is a pea shooter. You've got a 2.3 second reload, as you've seen in both of these game clips. We are running, I don't think we're actually running advanced loader, meaning that we haven't got that kind of highest DPM on the tank, so don't go thinking that you'll probably have the highest DPM with this, because it's not altogether that good. But yeah, certainly if you get round the enemies, as you'll see us trying to do with this Dreadnought. I don't know if he pre-aimed us, but now we're going to disengage from the target because he's turning around, and if we get hit by the Dreadnought, even if he's firing HE and he manages to hit us anywhere, even splash next to us, he's probably going to take us out. So yeah, not something you want to be dealing with. But within this game, obviously, if we can get any more damage on the Dreadnought, that's going to be perfect. Hopefully we will do, which we do manage to get one shot, although that very lucky because we just crested the ridgeline as we fired, and then it raised up afterwards, which meant we probably would have missed if we didn't hit fire straight away over that ridgeline. Now, granted, we are on 952 damage, pretty awful game to be honest, and we had certainly lost a lot of hit points. This is no stellar round of World of Tanks, but I think it was a funny one to just showcase what happens when you go a little bit too fast around a corner, and maybe we'll see that again in a minute. But you can see us taking once again a bit of a swing as we go round that corner and flying off onto the side. You'll see that you probably spend 20% of your time on your side with this tank, and yeah, that's what happens if you don't control the mobility to the best of your ability. And we finish off the Tiger P there. The KV-85 is looking our way. We use a handbrake turn to kind of stop. And now we're going to try and go over this ridgeline and try and get round him. Because if we can, we're going to farm up that last bit of hit points on him and hopefully win the game. But as with the speed, we're getting pushed over to the left, and then we end up aiming over to the right. So yeah, it ends up that we end up stationary, side on, to a KV-85 that's pre-aimed in our position. So yeah, we rolled our dice and unfortunately ended up in the wrong direction. But 977 damage, you know, that's probably a pretty average game within the T50-2 if you're not paying 100% of your attention to the tank itself. But there we go. Hopefully you did enjoy both aspects of the perfect game and the not so perfect game, and the probably more average game that you'll be playing in this tank. But there we go. Hopefully you did enjoy the video. If you did, remember to like it, and obviously if you want to check out some more content and you enjoy that on the channel, then do so, and I will link some on screen right now. Make sure that if you aren't subscribed already, you do so to just stay notified of everything that gets released by me. As of course we do the update news, which will be tomorrow's video as of the recording of this one, and hopefully you'll enjoy that as well. So there we go. I hope to see you in that one, and I hope to see you in the next one. Goodbye.